I talk about dividends a lot on this channel, but if you don't want to pick stocks for yourself, trying to find the right dividend ETF can be a little tough. So I did some digging, did some research, and I found the top 5 dividend ETFs. So let's get started. Number 5, ProShares S&P 500 Dividend Aristocrats ETF. Ticker symbol NOBL. NOBL is based on the S&P 500 Dividend Aristocrats Index, which measures the performance of S&P 500 companies that have increased their dividends every year for at least the last 25 consecutive years. And one thing about this index that I thought was interesting is that it actually weighs every company equally instead of weighing them in proportion to their overall value. In terms of holdings, NOBL holds 65 total stocks, with top holdings including W.W. Grainger, Nucor, and Chevron. But again, remember, the companies are pretty much equally weighted. In terms of performance, NOBL doesn't quite have 10 years of returns yet, but it has a 5-year annualized return of 9.31% and an 11.49 annual return since inception, which was actually in 2013, so very close to 10 years. The fund also has a Morningstar rating of 5 stars, which means it's been a very good performer compared to its peers. In terms of cost, it has an expense ratio of 0.35%, which means you'll pay $3.50 in fees per year for every $1,000 you have invested. And lastly, NOBL has a dividend yield of 1.88%. So I know what you're thinking. Why would you want to focus on a dividend ETF that only pays you 1.88% in dividend yield? And I get it. Anything under 2% seems like, maybe this isn't worth it. But the reason that I included it on the list is because it focuses on dividend aristocrat companies. And when you have companies that have consistently paid and increased their dividend for at least 25 straight years, then what you get is stability. So even though 1.88% doesn't seem like a lot, number one, you know that the dividend is going to be paid, and number two, you know that it's going to continue to increase because that's what those companies do. And at the end of the day, when you're building an income stream, reliability and consistent increases is what you're looking for. Number 4, Vanguard High Dividend Yield Index Fund ETF. Ticker symbol VYM. VYM is based off the FTSE High Dividend Yield Index, which is an index that tracks common stocks of companies that have a higher than average dividend yield. And when you compare this ETF to the previous one, this one holds a lot more stocks in its portfolio. And that doesn't necessarily make one better than the other, but it just means that there's more companies that impact the performance of this fund compared to the previous one. VYM holds a total of 444 stocks, with top holdings including Exxon, Johnson & Johnson, and JP Morgan Chase, as well as a bunch of other ones that you've probably heard of before. In terms of performance, VYM has a 10-year annualized return of 11.23%, and it has a Morningstar rating of 5 stars, which means it's been a very good performer compared to its peers. VYM has an expense ratio of 0.06%, which means you'll pay 60 cents every year in fees for every $1,000 invested. Extremely cheap. VYM pays out a dividend yield of 2.94%. VYM has a nice mix of overall return and pretty decent dividend yield, and the fact that it's a Vanguard fund means it's one of the most popular and biggest ETFs out there. Number 3, iShares Select Dividend ETF. Ticker symbol DVY. DVY is based off the Dow Jones U.S. Select Dividend Index, which aims to represent the U.S.'s leading stocks by dividend yield. DVY holds 104 stocks altogether, with top holdings that include Valero, Gilead Sciences, and Altria Group. From a performance standpoint, DVY has a 10-year annual return of 11.39%, and it has a Morningstar rating of 4 stars, which means it's been a good performer compared to its peers. DVY has an expense ratio of 0.38%, which means you'll pay $3.80 in fees for every $1,000 you have invested. And lastly, DVY pays a dividend yield of 3.30%. Number 2, the SPDR S&P Dividend ETF. Ticker symbol SDY. SDY is based off the S&P High Yield Dividend Aristocrats Index, which tracks the performance of companies in the S&P Composite 1500 that consistently increase dividends every year for at least 20 years. And so like we talked about with NOBL, focusing on dividend aristocrats means that you're going to have a stable income stream that's going to continue to get paid and continue to grow over time. SDY holds a total of 122 stocks, including top holdings like VF Corp, Walgreens, and 3M. In terms of performance, SDY has an 11.72% annual return over the last 10 years with a Morningstar rating of 5 stars, which means it's been a very good performer compared to its peers. SDY has an expense ratio of 0.35%, which means you'll pay $3.50 a year in fees for every $1,000 you have invested. And lastly, SDY pays a dividend yield of 2.47%. So you might be wondering why I have SDY number 2 and DVY number 3 when DVY pays a 3.3% dividend yield and has good overall returns as well. It was definitely close, but I decided on SDY at number 2 because the overall return is better, and the focus on Dividend Aristocrats means that income stream is going to be reliable and continue to consistently grow over time. But it was really close, and so depending on what you're most focused on, you may like one over the other. Okay, so before we get to number 1, I want to talk about a couple funds that just barely missed the list. Let's talk about a couple honorable mentions. Honorable mention, the Vanguard Dividend Appreciation ETF, ticker symbol VIG. So VIG is based off the S&P US Dividend Growers Index, which focuses on companies that have increased their dividends at least 10 consecutive years. It has a 10-year annualized return of 11.70% and an expense ratio of 0.06%. It has a Morningstar rating of 4 stars. VIG has a dividend yield of 1.90%. I chose to leave VIG off even though it has a really good 10-year return, mainly because it didn't even really compare to the other Vanguard fund, VYM, and the fact that it only has a 1.90 dividend yield just didn't really make it that attractive. Now I know you're going to say, wait, I thought NOBL only had a 1.88% yield, but because NOBL concentrates on Dividend Aristocrats with 25 years of dividend history and this fund only does 10, I picked NOBL. Honorable mention, the iShares Core Dividend Growth ETF, ticker symbol DGRO. DGRO is based off the Morningstar US Dividend Growth Index, which tracks US stocks with a history of uninterrupted dividend growth. DGRO doesn't quite have 10 years of returns yet, but it has an annual return of 11.39% since inception in 2013, so almost 10 years. And it also has an expense ratio of 0.08% and a Morningstar rating of 5 stars. DGRO has a dividend yield of 2.28%. So DGRO just barely missed the list, and it was mainly just because I like DVY better. The dividend yield is a little bit higher, but DGRO's focus on dividend growth is actually really great. So if you're not that worried about dividend yield right now, and you just want to concentrate on a dividend income stream that continues to grow over the future, DGRO may actually be the better pick for you. All right, enough talk. You probably guessed which one's number 1, but let's get to it. Number 1, the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, ticker symbol SCHD. SCHD is based on the Dow Jones US Dividend 100 Index, which tracks high dividend paying stocks in the US with a consistent record of paying dividends and having strong fundamentals relative to their peers. So SCHD is a dividend ETF that I talk about a lot on this channel, and it's definitely my favorite. The funny thing is, I hadn't really compared it to any other dividend ETFs for a while, so when I dug in for this video, I was really glad to see that it still came out on top and it was really the best overall performer, at least in my opinion. SCHD holds a total of 104 stocks, with top holdings including Broadcom, Verizon, Texas Instruments, and more. In terms of performance, SCHD has returned an amazing 13.35% annually over the past 10 years and has actually outperformed the S&P 500 in that time frame. It has a Morningstar rating of 5 stars, meaning it's been a very good performer compared to its peers. SCHD has an expense ratio of 0.06%, which means you'll pay 60 cents a year in fees for every $1,000 you have invested, which is tied for the lowest on the list. And lastly, SCHD has a dividend yield of 3.32%. SCHD is such a beast, I love it. It has the best overall return on the list, which has actually beat the S&P 500. It has the best dividend yield on the list, has tied for the lowest expense ratio on the list. I mean, it's just crushing it all the way around. And that's why it's continued to be one of my favorites and one that I talk about a lot and I actually invest in myself. So if you wonder why I didn't include any of the higher dividend yield ETFs on this list, I really was trying to prioritize stability and overall return over high yield. And the reason for that is when you're building an income stream, a passive income stream, my personal opinion is that you want it to be reliable and you want it to be something that's going to perform well over the long term, as opposed to something that just chases the highest yield right now. So I hope this video helped. If you guys do want to get started picking your own dividend stocks, click on this video right here and check out the 5 buy and hold forever stocks in my dividend portfolio. Hope you guys have a great day out there. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Keep stacking those wins for your family, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.